All right, here we are. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. What a week. What a week.
Hey, it is good to see you guys. I hope that everybody's had a great week so far. And this show is going to be one of this conversation is going to be one of our most interesting for us so far. We've been dealing with this mission and structure series. But Roger, what have we been talking about so far, man?
Wow, we've been gathering together for the last 2 weeks, talking about the structure and mission, how they intersect. We looked at it from a financial piece. We looked at it from an ethnic structure piece. And today we thought we would pump the brakes a little bit and have a conversation.
Wow.
But, in our conversation, I think we're going to have some guests come on.
Yeah, y'all know we ain't trying to pump no brakes. not with these guests today.
Hey, listen, are they still mystery guests?
I don't know.
Listen, I was thinking they were going to be mystery. We didn't put them in the flyer. We didn't put their pictures and stuff up. But as the countdown thing was streaming, I realized we put their names in the ticker that was across the bottom. So,
who's we? Who's we?
How are you trying to call me out like that, man?
Listen, guys, I want you to know we got to give God praise. 20 episodes of the Pastors Roundtable.
Wow.
We have pushed it through since COVID started.
Wow.
And, so we're at our 20th episode right now.
Hey, well, listen, this would not have been what it's been without the people that are watching. And so if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, I think we might even have a Twitter link and a IG link out there. Listen, we want to welcome you to the 20th episode of the Pastors Roundtable. And listen, you saw those names at the beginning of the screen. You want to share this feed now. You want to share it. You want to get somebody on because we're going to be talking about some things and having some guests that you want to hear from. Dr. Henry?
That's right. Listen, the guests that are coming on. We're not going to the guests yet, are we, Ansel?
No, not yet. Okay,
I was about to say, man.
I'm just saying, listen, if they want to be here when the guests start talking, they need to send the invites out so that the people are here to hear them. So they got to send it out now. But we're gonna hold them in reserve. They're chilling. They're in the green room. They're having cookies and crumpets and whatever else was for Sabbath
all
dinner.
the good stuff. Well, listen, you know what? Wow, what episode is this, Pastor Wade? What episode are we talking about
This
here?
is the 20th. This is the 20th
one.
Woo! I can't believe it. It seems like we just started this thing yesterday.
Mercy.
And when we started, I don't even know. We were guests. I don't even know what happened when we started, but we started.
When you started, I was your first guest.
That's right.
And I moved in.
Moved in, made house, set up a table.
Yes.
And we definitely had a wonderful time. We have a lot of things that we're going to share with you as these episodes go on. We're not going to tell you now, but we are excited. I guess we are going to tell them a little bit today, but we are excited about what God is doing through this ministry. And it's a ministry. It's a ministry that we're doing from week to week. And by the way, this week, what happened this week? What was significant this week, Pastor Paul or Pastor Wade? Did something happen this week that you're like, wow?
I know.
Okay, let me tell you. There was a convention that happened.
There's a Jamaican that...
Kamala, there you go.
Yeah. First time.
And again, we're not here to push any political agenda. We're just saying it happened this week. That's what we're saying.
It was historical.
Yeah, and I think they got their message across. What they're trying to do. So pay attention to the news. A lot of things are happening on the news, and hopefully, as we continue in the Pastors Roundtable, we can take what is current and bring it in here. Because we want to make this ministry real and relevant. Okay, we want to make it real and relevant. So
we also want to remember too. Today is the celebration. Sadly, the celebration of Emmett Till's death.
Oh, wow.
Emmett Till's death was today, and they have I think 65 years ago. And so they're doing. There's a lot of stuff out there on that, the insignificance and of what his death did for the movement.
Right.
For African Americans. And so we want to remember this young man who did something that was so innocent and it then turned into something so tragic.
Yeah.
But so we want to also remember that and encourage our young people that they do have someone here to encourage them, because not only is Emmett Till's death that we're celebrating, or not celebrating, but remembering today,
right? Yeah.
But commemorating. But we also got to remember, I also want to lift up our young people, because the CDC just came out with a new study that 1 in 4 actually, young people are considering suicide since COVID started.
Wow.
And we really need to recognize that this is more than just wearing a mask, staying home, being stuck in Zoom meetings or Skype meetings. There are real people who are behind these things, and they are suffering because of not being able to interact.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. All right. Well, gentlemen, let's get started. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and then let's jump into our deep dive today. Father, we just want to say thank you for bringing us to this point, and we ask that as we open this discussion today, as we engage some of the topics that we've gone over in the past, that you would just give us some clarity, give us direction, and Father, let your Holy Spirit have its way. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
All right, gentlemen. So we've been talking about mission and structure. Raj, help us out. Where do we start with?
Wow. Well, when we started out this process of looking at ministry in light of COVID-19 and how we realized that some of this stuff is systemic. Mm-hmm. It's something that's happening in the church. And we decided we want to look at the fact of, are we really doing what we said we wanted to do? Is our mission and our structures and our ministry aligning and getting us down the field as we say we are? And so we decided, we started this structure and mission series. So we had the question was asked: Are we still meeting our mission? What's the mission? What are we supposed to be doing? Is this what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, well, listen, at the very beginning, Dr. Henry, we were talking, and we were talking about that when the COVID thing hit, that everybody could just sense that everything was going into flux. It was going to be a whole different world. And that in the midst of flux, that we had a window, we had an opportunity. And I'm talking about the church, not just us, you and I, but the entire church. There's an opportunity now to be able to really address some of the things, and I hate to say this, and I hope it doesn't come off wrong, but there are some things about the structure that just frustrates a lot of pastors. There's things about the structure that frustrates a lot of our members, and they come and they talk to us about it, and like, we're in a season where change is happening all around us. So we're like, if we can kind of talk about some of these things and make some of these conversations move from back rooms and behind curtains and tables and normalize some of the issues that people have, so that we can address them, so that there can be some attention that's paid to them. And one of them was this issue of the financial structure of the church. So a couple of weeks back, Roger, we had a conference treasurer. One of the largest conferences in North America. One of them, I think they're either one or number two, both in membership and in finances, the Florida Conference Treasurer. Then we had the Atlantic Union Treasurer who was with us. And then we had the North American Division Treasurer that was with us. And in that discussion, we talked about some finances, or the financial structures of the church. Dr. Henry, what was a takeaway from there that you felt was a good thing that we learned about the structure of the church? And if there's something that frustrates you, Dr. Henry, I'm putting you on in the hot seat now. Is there something about the structure that you would change, or that frustrates you about the structure, or something that you love about it?
Well, I tell you what, that financial show was a really good show. I mean, it was an eye opener for me. And first of all, I want to commend the guests that came on, because They were transparent. I mean, they talked, if you go back to that show, they talked about their frustrations and some things that they would do differently. One thing that was really of interest to me is that when it was asked, that tithe definitely is our main source of revenue, our main source of funds. One of the treasurers said, listen, we can invest. He talked about investing.
Right.
You remember that?
Yeah.
And I guess there's some guidelines out there, but he talked about investing. So my mind just started to spin. I said, oh, wait a minute now. Okay. So we could invest some of the money of the church. And I believe, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, they're leaning towards, literal investments, stocks. That's the way. That's what I got. You got to let me know if I'm misinterpreting it, because I don't want to misinterpret it here.
No, yeah, that's what they said. I said we got a whole lot of Spirit of Prophecy quotes thrown at us in the chat though that day.
We did. But the reality is, what they're saying is there are more ways to invest the funds that we have, so that we can actually have more, and looking for ways. And and this is a topic that we probably need to discuss at some time, to finance what we're doing, not solely dependent on the tithe. In fact, biblically, we know that God said tithe and offerings, right?
Okay.
Tithe and offerings. So from a biblical standpoint, we know that the work is not solely dependent on tithe, but there is this offering. So could this offering be an investment? I don't know. I got to study that. So that's really what what I gained from that show and some of the things that they said.
So Roger, Roger, it sounds like what Doc Henry is saying is that there's not enough money that comes into the church through tithes and offerings to be able to fund mission. Is that accurate? Is that
Say that again, Pastor Paul, because I want to make sure you get me right.
I'm trying to get you right. It sounds like you're saying that through the finances that come into the church now, right, either one thing, either there is not enough to fund mission, so we need to try some other things to fund our ministries besides tithe and offering, or how the tithe and offering is currently being used and redistributed is not effective in accomplishing the mission that the church has. It's got to be one of those two things, right?
Right. So what I'm going to say is this, that the tithe in God's plan, when I read the word of God, tithe is a way to definitely fund what we're doing. Okay. But God adds or couples offering. Right?
Okay, got you.
So the church is just not running on tithe, but there is this offering.
All right.
Okay. And so with this offering, my question is that
we got 30 seconds before we're supposed to bring in our first guest. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness. Okay. But with this offering, are there ways that we could invest the offering for mission? And lastly, I would say that the way we utilize the tithe and offering, I think there can be and should be some changes, so that the local church can have more funds to fulfill the mission. Yes.
Okay. Now, but here's the point, Roger. He said, can they invest the offering? Our treasurers told us they're not investing offering, they're investing tithe. That's what we heard.
Yes, they did. They did say that. They did say that, and they conservatively invest the tithe. But what I heard from that show, you're right. It's a sense of not having enough funding to really do what we want to do. But what I love about the system that they brought up was the fact of the God factor. A lot of us miss that God factor. The fact that what we give, God now takes and multiplies and uses and does things that blow our mind. There are ministries that are happening, things that are going on, blessings, even conferences. As I'm at the union level, I'm hearing about conferences that get blessings from offerings from people who will drop millions of dollars as the tenth of their blessing, of their increase. And so I believe there is a God factor in it. I think Randy Robinson said it best. when he puts his dollar in at his local church, it not only raises the local giving, it also raises the regional giving. And when I say regional, the churches around him, and it also it raises the global giving. And so what our members need to be impacted on or committed to is just being faithful and give what they have. And when that is done, I don't think the church will have a money problem. And I don't think the church has a money problem.
Oh boy, you got come
Okay,
in there. Okay,
well,
hold on, guys. Our time. I'm looking at the clock. We got to bring in our first guest.
Haven't heard. Wait a minute now. We haven't heard from you, Pastor Paul. I mean, you've been asking the question. We haven't heard from you about the financial distribution of the funds in the church.
You're asking for my opinion on it.
Well,
one of the things that we learned is that so at the local level, oftentimes most of us here, we're sending all of our tithe away and we're not getting any of it back. What we heard was when you factor into how much goes into funding the salary of a pastor, funding the salary of teachers, that the majority of our churches, this is what we learned, that the majority of our churches actually get more of their tithe back than they send up. Because most of our churches in North America are 100 members or less. And if it's taking $120,000 to fund a pastor's salary during that time, you have a lot of churches, they're turning in $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in tithe per year. That's, your typical small church. We do have some much larger churches, but many churches are not really what they're getting back from their tithe is coming back to them in their pastor's salary, in their teachers, in the benefits and things that are funding them. So oftentimes, many churches aren't really able to support, and that's probably the reason why many churches pastors have more than one church, because they're trying to make sure that salary is supported. Listen, our next guest, can we go? Because he's waiting. I've seen here. He's anxious. So our next guest is he has been in this thing for a long time, and particularly when it comes to finances and money, we have seen him do the Lord has used him to do some wonderful things in making resources available at the local church level. You've seen him do it in what was the name of that place? Somewhere in Nashville, in South Nashville. You've seen him do it in Texas, in Houston, Texas. You've seen God use him in Atlanta, Georgia. I skipped one. What was the first one? Was it? It was one of them. Mississippi. Mississippi. You've seen God do stuff in Atlanta, Georgia. We've seen God do stuff through him in Huntsville, Alabama. We've seen God use him to make resources appear at the Breath of Life Ministries. He is the speaker, director of Breath of Life. We want to bring on at this time the one and the only Dr. Carlton P. Byrd from Breath of Life. Good afternoon, Dr. Byrd.
Good afternoon. I was like, who are they talking about? No, but it's good to be on today, Pastor Paul, Pastor Wade, Dr. Henry. God bless you all. Now, I love this. I love this discussion. I don't know if y'all are ready for me, but I love it. I just want y'all to know.
Well, we're buckling up. My greeter this morning, as they gave the welcome, told everybody to buckle up, put their seats in upright positions, put all their stowaways. We're ready, man. We're ready to take off. So when you hear us talk about this discussion of resources at the local level, what goes through your mind when you understanding the financial structure of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and you've been in situations where you see the need to have resources at the local level, and some of us, we're pastoring in these little places, but when we step into I'm gonna get in trouble when we step into the conference office, when we step into the union office, when we step into the division office, we go on tour at the GC office, and we're greeted by all the statues and all the plush stuff, and then we go back and I see holes in my wall, my roof is falling down. What do you have? How do you address that, Doc?
Well, you've already said what I needed to say, but with you saying what you said, I saw Pastor Wade, our colleague at the union level, just drop his head back, but I'll leave that alone. But the reality is, as you have shared, we have to figure out a way on how we can get greater resources at the local level. If we're going to have a strong general conference, if we're going to have a strong North American division, if we're going to have a strong union, if we're going to have a strong local conference, we have to have strong churches. And I think we've reached a point that we've done enough discussion and talking about it. We got to do something. The reality is, any financier, any accountant will tell you, if you want to grow, if you want your bottom line to grow, you've got to increase revenues, you have to decrease expenses. And I've said this on other panels, and I'll say it on this one. I believe repetition deepens the impression. The reality is, I think that the only way where we can make immediate impact is to really identify with our local conference, because that's the recipient of 100% of the tithe remittances from the local churches.
Initially, right.
We got to start there, and we have to begin to ask ourselves the same question we've been asking about meeting and congregating during this season of COVID-19. What is essential and what is non-essential? You got to begin to ask that question. And that is not to limit or minimize and say that this department is not important and this department is not important. But you have to begin to ask yourself, what is most important at this day and age? If COVID-19 has taught us anything else, we are still doing ministry. We are still having church, as it were. And so there are some things that have been streamlined, and with the streamlining of those things, we're able to see greater revenues. For example, a lot of us, we look at our conference, local conference, tithe, the mission statements, or even at the union level, you look at local conference, the aggregate tithe, the mission statement, then the division looks at unions and whatnot. So a lot of people are just looking at the revenues. And so people are concerned with the COVID-19, are the revenues going to go down? But God is still blessing.
Yes, he is.
Sure is.
One thing I think we're not looking at as strong are the decreased expenses. In our conference alone, during this period of COVID-19, independent of whatever the tithe is, and we have a major tithe gain right now, praise God, but our expenses have drastically reduced.
Yes.
And one of those ways, expenses, we've all seen it, is travel. Travel. As a Seventh-day Adventist church, we have a great corporate body and structure, and we have this level and that level. But we have to be honest with ourselves. Travel alone, we could minimize some of that, save on some of that, and put some of those funds into local ministry at the conference level and local ministry, most importantly, at the local church level. So I want to say, we always talk about the money, the tithe, the revenue. But I think we need to look at expenses. It's in our local church. People ask all the time, Doc, how are you able to do what you're doing? Well, when I get to a church, I sit down with the treasury team, the finance committee of the church, and we begin to go through our expenses and we say, now what can we eliminate? There are some things we've just been doing just because we've been doing them.
Wow.
Are they effective? Are they essential? And so there are little things. You know, someone said, well, you just want to cut this $50 from this department, which is very small. Okay, we cut the $50 from that department. You multiply that by 12 months, that's $600. That's $600 you can use for something else. And sometimes it's little steps like that with the cutting of expenses that increase our operations, our money for operations where we can do ministry. And we talked about it long enough. We need to do it. We don't need to be offended that we're having the discussion, but we need to talk about it. Think about it, friends of mine. When we started our conferences, whether they're state or regional, we had strong, exhaustive departmental director positions.
Okay.
And a lot of that was because we did not have the communication channels and mediums that we have today. So in order to do training, in order to do inspiration and encourage people with the different ministries, you had to have a departmental director that would visit and go across the conference. Well, now with the communication channels we have, we need to reevaluate that. It could very well be that a person who is a local church pastor could also head up for that conference, or a state within that conference, a departmental ministry. Because you're not just looking at the salary of the departmental director, you're looking at the salary of the support staff, you're looking at the salary of equipment, you're looking at benefits, you're looking at all of these things. And I'm being honest, the chickens are going to come home to roost.
Mercy.
Because you have that younger generation who is saying, wait a minute, we work every day on jobs. We're looking at efficiency. We're looking at effectiveness. And if we can do that on jobs, surely we can do that at our church. So you can get me talking all day about this. I think, though, we need to have an emphasis not just on our revenues, but also on our expenses. Because if you increase the revenues, you have greater money for ministry. If you decrease your expenses, you have greater money for ministry. Bottom line, we have to get more resources at the local level. It's got to happen.
But Dr. Byrd, you're saying you're speaking the language that needs to be spoken. But the question is, yes, we look at expenses, we look at income, but the real problem within the church is the people that we have in these departments or in these levels. And
who gets to make those decisions? That's it.
I'm looking in the mirror here, and I'm looking in the mirror making a decision saying, hey, if I want to do ministry, I need some dollars. But the question is, there are people who make decisions on how these dollars are spent. When is it we will turn the corner and make that decision and say, hey, let's move in this direction. Let's get someone into the position that will utilize the expertise that they have and the technology that we have to make these things happen. When is that going to happen?
Roger,
now you're trying to get me in trouble.
Trying to get you in trouble. I just got myself in trouble. No, but I mean, but to be honest with you, as I said earlier, it's not a money problem, but it's about how we utilize those.
It's our structure and how we utilize it. And the reality is, there's a lot that we can learn from the current movement we have witnessed and experienced as it relates to equality over the past couple of months. Okay. There's a lot of unrest going on right now, just on a lot of things, and it's money is the same thing. And so the same way we're saying with the equality issues in society, you've got to have some difficult conversations. We've got to have some difficult conversations with leadership. And we're leaders, all of us, we're leaders. Okay. And we have to have those difficult conversations, and whether we're ready for it to happen, we got to have it.
Somebody's saying it's going to happen sooner than we think, Stephanie.
It is. We got to have those difficult conversations. And the challenge is, I'm thankful, Pastor Wade, you're on this call because you are part of the union level in terms of directorship and whatnot. And I'm grateful to hear you even saying, look, if it means assessment of and not necessarily me, but assessment of what I do and the ministries that I'm involved in, then I got to do that. Because a lot of times people don't want to have those conversations because it's going to personally impact them. So we've got to have those difficult conversations. And then after we have the conversation, the outcome cannot go into the sea of forgetfulness. We've got to implement. We can't just have the discussion and the conversation and not execute. It's got to happen. If it doesn't happen, if we're too reactive, our members are going to get proactive. And they're going to begin diverting funds. They're going to begin making adjustments and changes. Because the younger generation, I can't believe I say that because I always want to say I'm part of the younger generation. But they will vote with their feet.
Yeah.
They're not going to stay in a church business meeting. They're not going to go to a conference constituency session. They're just going to vote with their feet. And they're going to vote with their pocketbooks and their wallets. And they're going to get the point. They're at the point. We're not arguing. We're not fussing. This is what we're going to do. And this is how it's going to happen. And you have pastors now even, years ago it used to be that, well, if you have a tithe decrease, there could be something punitive as a result of that. Ouch. You got pastors now saying it is what it is, hey, do what you have to do. And so we're in a tough, tight spot here. And I just think it's better if we attack it on the front end. And we need to attack it now, because if we don't, we're going to have some very, very difficult days ahead. I say this all the time, and I'll be quiet. The money is going to run out. It's not that we don't have it. It's how we're using it. It's how it's structured. It's going to run out. Pastor Paul, you're correct. Most of our churches are small. They cannot afford, their pastor. But we do need to understand where in the local conference, where in the union, where in the division, where in the general conference, where are there non-essential expenses? Eliminate those, and then we got to get some money back to the local level to do ministry. More ministry, more baptisms.
Come on now.
More ministry, more baptisms. More baptisms, more people. More people, more ministry. More ministry, more baptisms. More baptisms, more people, more more ministry. And the cycle just goes on. It's not rocket science.
Well, listen, you answered, Dr. Byrd, you answered one of my questions. One question that I had was, we are a constituent-based organization. So how do you initiate change in a constituent-based organization? But you answered it, because people, they're not going to care about constituency. The money.
And you're getting me in trouble. And I don't want to say this because someone's going to think I'm being personal, and I'm not. In our current world, so here in Huntsville, I've been very, very active in equality and issues of equality over the past couple months. And one of the biggest discussions right now in our civic space, if I can use that term, is the removal of Confederate monuments and the removal of statutes and whatnot. And at the end of the day, it's being said, if the people who have the responsibility to make the decision don't make the decision in terms of the removal of Confederate monuments and removal of Confederate statutes, if you can't get the people to change the laws, you got to change the people. And that's hard, but it's amazing. That's what we say to our people that come to us on Sabbath. We say to them, you listen, if you want the monument gone, if the people in charge aren't going to change it, then you got to change them. And I appeal to my colleagues and my brothers and my sisters and everybody. That is true also in the church. So we don't have to change the people. I encourage the people that can make the changes to make the changes, so we don't have to change the people.
But listen, there is a somber lesson in that illustration that you just gave. When people aren't willing to do it, the people who are placed there to do it, people are getting dressed up in the night, and they're going down and they're riding and they're tearing those things down. They are not waiting for the people who are supposed to be in charge. They're saying, we are going to make this happen with or without you. And that's a very sobering message. And it probably will. Listen, we have already got people doing it in this church. Listen, Dr. Byrd, this was supposed to be a cameo, y'all. We're not giving you Dr. Byrd for this whole show. Dr. Byrd is going to be with us again for the entire show on October 31.
Wow.
October 31.
You would have me on Halloween. Go ahead.
On Halloween. But listen, there's a part of, we're going to be doing a series on health, actually. And I always say, that's not Dr. Byrd's wheelhouse. However, listen, some of what we've just talked about now, talking about having resources at the local level, Dr. Byrd is going to tell us just a little bit about how he's using the resources at his local level to engage something that we've seen happen all around the world in this concept of blue zones. In 30 seconds, Dr. Byrd, what are you doing in Huntsville with local resources, or with the resources that you've been able to put together, that somehow intersects in this? But don't give us everything, because we got to have something for give us, yeah.
25 seconds now. God has blessed us. We just constructed a 20,000 square foot family life center. Ooh. In that family life center, we have a medical clinic. Medical clinic services people in the community, not just church members, not just university students, but community members. We're very clear at the Oakland University Church now. For years, it was just thought of the campus church. Yes, campus church, but yes, we've got to reach our community. So with that, we have a clinic with medical care providers, physicians, nurse practitioners who volunteer their time and actually service the community with medical checkups, exams, all that kind of good stuff. We have a contract with the veterans in our area where we provide their annual physical. So we praise God for that. On the 31st, I look forward to sharing, look forward to talking how we got it, how we started, because I believe it can be a blessing to so many.
All right. Thank you so much for that. We are looking forward to that. You want to mark that date on your calendar. You want to make sure that you are back with us at the roundtable on the 31st, as Dr. Byrd is going to be with us for the entire show on that Sabbath. So mark that down, and we look forward to having Dr. Byrd with us back again at that time. Thank you so much, Dr. Byrd.
Now, Thank you, brothers.
If you don't have to go far, Dr. Byrd, if you don't have to go far, stay close. Don't hang up on us, because we may bring you back just before we finish up today. I know you can go, but stay close. Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. There's another person on the seat. We need to bring another guest on the seat. He's coming on, and tell us who that person is, Pastor Paul. Let us know.
All right. Today we have now. Okay, so let me set this up right, and I hope I don't mess this up for y'all. So last week we talked about mission and structure, and we talked about the ethnic structures in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We were talking about essentially regional conferences or black conferences, black churches, black schools, and we had an august assembly with us that were talking about that with us. Great discussion, but we were watching the chat. And over and over and over in the chat, Roger, people were telling us, well, y'all need to have some white pastors in on this conversation. You need to have, we want to know what they feel or how they think about these ethnic structures. And even as it intersects some of what we just talked about, the resources in that conversation, we talked about the duplication of resources in some of these various areas. And so today we have with us a 27-year-old, does that make him a millennial? Is he a millennial? Yes, he's a millennial. All right. 27-year-old a lay pastor coming to us from Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is one of the associate pastors there at the Crosswalk Chattanooga Seventh-day Adventist Church. He works full-time at Southern Adventist University, but he is also the host of 2 different podcasts, Absurdity and A Beautiful Faith. And he runs a YouTube channel, and he is founder of the Absurd Podcast Network. He is co-founder of the Scratch News and SD, and he calls himself an SDA News. Oh man, I read it wrong. Ryan, I thought it said agitator, but it says aggregator. All right. But he is an SDA News aggregator. And so we want you to welcome with us today none other than Pastor Ryan Becker, who has joined us today. Ryan, welcome to the Pastors Roundtable, sir.
Yes.
Welcome.
All right, Ryan, we've got you muted. We can't hear you quite yet. Yeah. And we still can't hear you yet.
Unmute him. We want to hear what he has to say.
And not yet. He's working on it. I'm confident it's going to be here in a minute because we had it working. We were hearing him earlier.
It might be on our side.
Yeah, I'm looking on our side, the Skype. Well, if we're hearing you guys.
Can you hear me now?
Boom! There we go. All right.
There we go. My some of the software I run my microphone through just decided, I'm not going to work. I was working and then I stopped. But no, I'm excited to be here. I've never been the token white guy before, so this is a brand new experience for me. But this is going to be a good time. And you can call me an agitator. I'm fine with it. There's nothing wrong with that. I like to stir the pot a bit.
All right.
No problem. But listen, when we met last week and we talked about this, we didn't really get into the whether we should or should not have regional conferences, but we did talk about the impact of regional conferences to the mission, and then this is how we kind of shifted to the state conferences, or the white conferences. They connecting to the mission. And so a lot of folks were beginning to ask the question, how could we talk about that conversation without having some Caucasian pastors on board? And so, hey, we went to work. Just to let our viewers know, we went to work. Once we ended the show, we looked far and wide, and we are planning a show that we are hoping to have Caucasian pastors be on there, and we dialogue. And Ryan has said he's willing to come. But Ryan's claim to fame is a video that he shared when this whole racial issue thing started, on the reasoning why we should not get rid of regional conferences and maybe consider getting rid of state conferences.
Wow. Ryan,
and that's where he rode. That's how he rode the wave, and so I'm just so happy to have Ryan here with us. Ryan, what was the thinking, Ryan? What were you thinking at that time?
Well, I think part of my issue was there's a lot of assumptions that come with with the way that the white community tends to view regional conferences and just segregation in general. And there are quite a few white people. I'm not going to talk about white people completely as a monolith, the same way that I think it's inappropriate to talk about black people as a monolith, right? I think we fall into some dangerous traps there. So if you're someone that doesn't fall under any of the descriptions I give here, then congratulations, you are the exception. Well done. So if you're going to get mad because you think I generalized you, if it doesn't apply to you, then I didn't generalize you. We did it, team. Good work, everyone. So. But there's a lot of assumptions that come with regional conferences. The first assumption being that they are that their existence is inherently racist, and that's one of the first issues that I've run into. The second issue that I've run into is the assumption that actually, there's three assumptions. The second issue is that regional conferences are even a problem that need to be solved, and number three. Is that if there is a problem that needs to be solved, then the only way to solve that problem is by getting rid of regional conferences. And while my position itself isn't necessarily that we should get rid of state conferences, the idea is more that there's a number of solutions that are possible here, and we shouldn't let an assumption of or our guilt toward the existence of whatever the reason that anything started to exist be what drives us to a solution. And so that's kind of, I wanted to open up the minds of people who were against these separate conferences and try and just offer up some more perspective. Because as you think about it more, the easy answer in a time where we're dealing with things like George Floyd, today is the anniversary of the death of Emmett Till, who I did another video referencing in regards to Amy Cooper in Central Park, and how the lessons from Emmett Till play a very big role in what happened in that incident, because of weaponized prejudice in an unexpected moment. Wow. And I just think it's the easy answer when white people want to take a stand, or when anyone wants to take a stand. And unfortunately, once you take the time to think it through, it actually ends up taking a major step backwards in the area of equality and I guess racial representation even within the Adventist church, to just do away with these conferences. So I just think that there's a lot more to the conversation that needs to be considered before we just say, yeah, get rid of them.
If there is, and I'm going to throw this out to everybody. I know Ryan is on here, but I'd love for even our host to kind of chime in on this if you feel moved to. There's a sneaky suspicion that I feel that all of us, and we talked about it last week, that all of us have this mindset that there should be an ideal, right? That in Christ there is no Jew nor Greek, all of that we're kind of all one, right? And I think all of us kind of deep down at our core, we feel that. I think we want to be together, or if we don't want to, we feel like we're supposed to at some point, right? Because when we get to heaven, that's the ideal, and people wonder, is there going to be a black part of heaven and a white part and an Asian part, et cetera, et cetera. And none of us really believe that that's how it's going to be there. What do we think is the thing, or maybe some things that keep us now in 2020? Somebody said deep down, way deep down. What do we think are the things that keep us from being able to achieve that idyllic unity down here right now in 2020?
I think it's a false assumption of what unity is, to be honest, and a false and a misunderstanding of the purpose and nature of culture and cultural identity. Yes, we are in Jesus. We are all one, and there is no Jew or Greek. And when I read that, especially within the context of a lot of the racism and sexism that took place in the early church, I see that as more saying that there's no place for us, there's no place for hating anyone of a different cultural identity, and that everyone is equally welcome at that table, and all of those differences that would divide us get set to the side as we all look to worship Jesus. But unfortunately, we've taken that to mean that everyone has to worship together all the time. We have to have these this idea that these multicultural worship services are the only way that we have unity, or racial unity within the church. When in reality, a lot of those people, if they had a pastor of a different race, you've got white flight. You've got, I would actually say, throughout history, and even we've seen this in the Florida Conference, Anselm, where white people sometimes are willing to stay a little bit more willingly, black people are more willing to stay with a white pastor than white people with a black pastor. And that's a sad, unfortunate reality. And the other sad, unfortunate reality is that most of, at least Western Adventism's understanding of a multicultural worship service is an acoustic guitar, a piano, and a cajon for the cultural people. And then we sing "How Great Is Our God," and then we whip out "Days of Elijah" for that real spice. And so we just end up doing what is essentially Eurocentric Adventism, and dressing it up as multicultural worship. Mm-hmm. And that's what's sad to me. And there's a lot more there, obviously, and that's why there will eventually be a whole episode on this. But yeah, there's a lot there in my mind.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. Growing up in Trinidad, where it was very conservative mindset in terms of religion, and then coming to the United States, I shared with some people that the first time I heard gospel music was when I entered Oakwood College in 1994. Prior to that, even living in Brooklyn, New York, although there was gospel music all around, it was not part of my listening concept. So I really did not understand until I got exposed at Oakwood about black being black. I'm sorry that although I was black all the time, but it's interesting that I think comfort levels is one of the reasons that keeps us separate. I'm not comfortable in a particular setting or with a particular group, so I tend to stay away from that group, and so then I really am oblivious to what's going on over there, and they are oblivious to what's going on over here. And it's only now, even when there are enough people that are strong enough to cross the divide, that's when we begin to ask the question, do I belong here? And that's when white flight happened. But I want to also say we introduced the concept of black flight. There is also a mindset of black flight, and we talked about that a little bit last week, where we have African Americans in particular who will move out of the neighborhood that they grew up in because they want to get something a little better. And sometimes that better is a better church, a better situation, a better job, a better opportunity, and nothing wrong with that. But then when we leave a certain situation, it does not grow because we're growing, but they're not growing. And when we leave that, their opportunity to grow is lost. And so we have to remember that. We have to remember that even in this conversation, I
think George Jefferson is taking great exception to what you just said.
I'm looking at this. I have to be honest. I'm really looking at this from coming out of the Caribbean into New York City, into Huntsville, Alabama for school, and now I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. There are black people here. Don't get me wrong. There are black people here, but it's like living in New York. You would never think there are black people anywhere else. And so being out here and having to connect with a different group of people for worship and for listening to sermons and for fellowship and all that, it's a different mindset, and and sometimes it can be very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. I think that mingling with others, spending time with others, going to services. I don't think anyone is against it, and you're definitely not saying it, but no one's against. Well, I don't want to say no one, but I think that people are not against mingling. But when we talk about conferences, as I look more into this issue, I think that given the climate of our country and where we are, I think regional conferences are necessary. I think, and I commend Pastor Ryan. I mean, when we come to this conversation, and not just saying on this show, but many other shows, the topic is, should we eliminate regional conferences? But I think there's other options, and we have to take a hard look at what's happening now. And, I think that regional conferences are effective.
Yeah.
I think they're effective. I think reaching the urban settings and other settings. And, we talk about black flight. How about midnight flight, right? but there are a lot of people that, we move it on up. And so we get out of the community, which leads us to a show that we did maybe a month ago when we had Pastor Kelly on, and he was talking about the new Black Wall Street, right? And trying to develop the community so that the community is reflective of the church. And so staying in there basically and renovating and doing different things. And so we have several different challenges as we talk about mission. And another thing I want to throw out there is that, let's take, for instance, New York City. A lot of the churches there in New York City are Caribbean churches, right? Mm-hmm. So some would argue that that's a Caribbean conference in the United States. And I'm just be honest. And when you go down,
need to add South Florida too.
South Florida, Miami, and so forth. And so one question and one thing that I'm intrigued about, where's the indigenous growth? We need more churches that reflect the place and where we live, right? And how do we get that? How do we reach out and tap into that growth? Because that's essential.
And by indigenous, you mean immigrant European, right? Is that what you're? that's what you mean, or do you really mean indigenous? I mean, those are two different concepts.
They out west, so it ain't gonna happen in New York.
So again, I think the issue remains that I think our thing is mission, and we want to grow, and sometimes growth happens at a faster rate within your own culture. So sometimes that happens at a faster rate. Yeah. And so how do we multiply that so that other cultures or ethnicities are growing at a rate that is acceptable?
All right. Those are some great questions. I look forward to getting into them when we have Pastor Becker back with us, along with some others, as we dive into that. And I got to throw this out here, because if you guys are ever in on some of the Pastors Roundtable production meetings as we sit and talk, you know that we kind of go a lot on this issue. And one of the things that I often struggle with is that I think that in many cases when I think there's a misconstruing of some of the conversation. So, Dr. Henry, you just said that whenever the conversation comes up, or often when the conversation comes up, it has to do with getting rid of regional conferences. Well, I would take exception to that, in that I think many times the conversation isn't, let's get rid of regional conferences. They're saying, why can't everybody be together? In that sense, they're not saying get rid of regional conferences. They're not saying get rid of state conferences. They're saying merge them. When you do that, in essence, you kind of get rid of regional conferences. But here's the thing. You don't get rid of state conferences. Why? Because regional conferences were established with a singular people group in mind. State conferences, although they were not established with a singular people group in mind, that's really all they were doing. They weren't paying attention to the black work. They weren't paying attention to the others. But by definition, they were saying, we're here to reach everybody. And the reason that there was the split is because they weren't doing a great job at reaching the black population of everybody. And so they said, hey, we're going to do this. But when black conferences started, they did not start in order to reach Asians. They did not start in order to reach what we'd say Native Americans. They started explicitly with the mindset of reaching those who the state conferences were not reaching, the black people in the United States. That's what the concept was. So When you merge them, if you merge them, then yeah, essentially that is getting rid of a single entity that has a ethnic focus as opposed to a multicultural focus. So sure, it's by default a conversation of getting rid of regional conferences, but that's often not the intent of the person who's saying it. They're not saying we don't want to stop reaching black people. They're saying, why can't we do it together? So we're going to have time because we have another guest in the wings.
But let me just say this.
Let's hear what Ryan had to say.
Go ahead, Ryan.
My thing was going to be like 10 seconds. I promise.
Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say as a whole sneak peek to every part of my platform that you'll get in a full episode later, is simply this: if we want to talk about ending racism in the church, ending or bringing together conferences is the last step in that process, not the first. And I think that is a good place for me that will both pique some curiosity, but also I think it's a strong enough statement, and I think it's evident when you really start to think about that.
Agreed. Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to getting more into that as we go forward. But Pastor Becker, thank you, man. Thank you so much for joining us today. We don't want you to go far. We've got gonna probably bring you guys back just before we finish. But we're looking forward to that conversation. You want to be back to hear Pastor Becker expound a little bit more, along with some other of our colleagues on September. Roger, help me out. What's that date?
September 12th.
September 12th. Pastor Becker is going to be with us for the entire show. And so we're looking forward to Pastor Becker being with us. And again, thank you so much for your contribution today on that. You can check out, we're going to put some of Pastor Becker's links on the page. His podcast that you can go and check out, his YouTube channel. We're going to put those links out there so you can go and browse those things. And go ahead, Raj.
But before he leaves, I just want to get his take on this, because as we are talking, we only talked about from the regional conference concept. But when we look at the North American division, we realize there are more ethnic groups that have begun to develop policy-driven structures. So the Hispanics have one, the Koreans have one, right. And I think in just the last scratch I just read talked about that particular group is excited for the new NAD secretariat that was voted, that now they have a whole stake in the leadership of our church. But I understand also there are some Hispanics, Latinos, that are not too happy right now because they thought it was their turn. And so we have all these different ethnicities. But as a Caucasian pastor, I read your scratch. But what is your take on the multitude of ethnicities, and how should the church begin to normalize that within the leadership?
I mean, I think the first one is those with power need to revisit what Jesus is teaching and what the New Testament is teaching on power within Christianity is. Because power is not power over, it's power under. And so seeking to give up authority and giving power where we can is really important, to the point that me, 3 years into full-time pastoral ministry, or less than 3 years, I already had an intern from college with me, trying to mentor and lead and give him opportunity as well. So that's number one. Number two, I would simply say this: any solution that we look towards for anything should, at the bare minimum, maintain the representation that we have. But ideally, it will also increase the representation across the board. And I think there are ways for that to happen. Obviously, I don't want to get into that right now, but I think that there is plenty of room for everyone at this table. If there wasn't, how do we even have a gospel? There is room. And let's find it. Let's make it. Let's celebrate it and embrace people.
Okay, awesome. So thank you so much. We look forward to having you back on the 12th as we really delve into some of these issues that we tend to scoot around when we get together as pastors and as members.
So listen, we have another guest that's waiting to come on. Excited about him. Tell us, Pastor Wade, do you want to tell us who is at the table? Who's coming?
Well, listen, man,
This is from your comment.
This show so far has been like fireworks,
I don't think.
and it's just getting bigger and better and bigger.
Yeah.
One of the other voices that we heard as we were talking about mission and structure was we needed to hear the voice of the young people, the millennials. And so we decided we're going to have a show about speaking to the millennial mind. And we kind of looked around. Trust me, there's a lot of millennials out there. But we were so excited that this millennial said that he was willing to come on and cameo today, but definitely be with us at our show there in October. It's going to be the first weekend in October. And we're glad to have with us. His father was our teacher.
That's right.
So this is the product. This
Pastoral
is the product.
Ministry class back in 1999.
And I remember him coming to class, sitting in the back quietly, having to come through, sitting in the office, waiting for his dad. We're just so glad to have you, James Doggette Jr., JD as he's known. Welcome
to there he is.
It is good to be here.
Yeah, and listen, he brings with him a massive ministry.
Wow, yeah.
Revival, man. People listening to this thing all over the country. I want to say all over the world,
man. The quarantine revival. This brother came out the gate on fire, Dr. Henry.
Listen, the pandemic did not slow the gospel and the mindset of Pastor James Doggette. And right before we let him just talk to us a little bit, listen, I have a couple pastors I communicate with. Some are coming up in the ministry, and they said, "Hey, Pastor Henry, you got to check out this quarantine revival. It's blowing up." And let me tell you, you're doing it. You're doing it. So I want to commend you for your ministry, commend you for what you're doing. You're blessing the body of Christ. And we are so grateful that you made it on our show today. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
Anytime. I'm glad to have been given the invitation. Are y'all kidding me? You have Dr. Byrd, then you got Pastor Becker, and y'all expect me to follow these two guys and to be here with you all, Dr. Henry, Pastor Anselm Paul, and Pastor Roger. Listen, this is great. I'm just happy to be in the virtual building.
Yeah, man. Look, and we are excited to have you with us today. So JD, this is what we got coming up next week. So again, we told you we're doing this series on mission and structure. We kind of addressed two of those segments already. The issue of finance, of financial structure, the ethnic structures in the church. Now, next week we're looking at the governance structures of the church, the governance, and you being a millennial young pastor coming on the scene, seeing how the church is structured with the governance thing. Now, I know a lot of us, when we came in as young preachers, there was, we weren't necessarily all that familiar with how everything worked. We knew we wanted to get into a church and we wanted to preach. We wanted to baptize folk and win souls for the kingdom. All the political stuff and structural stuff, we weren't necessarily paying all that attention to. But this is what I know. You are a PK, and you are a PK's PK. Your grandfather was my conference president years ago, right here in Florida and in Southeastern. And so we know you have some kind of a tangent cognition of what happens at the structure, at the governance level. And so let's so Dr. Henry, when we talk about governance, that's not a common word that many of our members and our listeners may hear. So when we're talking about governance, can you unpack that for just a little bit? And then JD, we kind of want to get a sense of, do millennials care about this stuff? Number one, do they even care? Do they want to get engaged? Do they want to get involved? And if so, or if not, how do we get them there? So Dr. Henry, first, if you just give us just a kind of a purview of what we mean when we say governance, and then JD, take it from there.
Okay. Right. So this show started talking about the governance and the structure of the church. I mean, we started this way. That was something that we wanted to bring out. We wanted to get the viewpoint of the viewers about this governance, this structure that we have. We talk about the different levels also of the church, right? And, coming out of seminary, Pastor Paul, Pastor Wade, James Doggette, I mean, we know, when we came out, they made a point. They said, listen, it's conference, it's union, then it's general conference. Before taking that class, I'm thinking, wait a minute, conference, union, division, and general. No, listen. The division is just the general conference operating on that sphere of the world, right?
Lord.
Division are supposed to represent the mindset of the general conference, which we could debate on that, right? So we have this neat structure that we have in our church. But as a millennial, the millennial mindset, you come into this thing. Does it really, what do you think about it?
We talk about constituency meetings.
We are a constituent-driven organization, right? So if there are changes that need to be made, you got to go through the process, got to go through the Constitutional Bylaws Committee. And sometimes even when it comes to the constituents or the constituency meeting, they say, hey, listen, because it didn't go through the right process, you have to actually wait for the next 4 or 5 years to bring it up. So what do the millennials, just based on your understanding and knowledge?
All right, so you just gave a mouthful there. I just need you to know that you've done a great job in kind of articulating a lot of the different steps that are taken in order to get things done. I had the privilege of also working for the United States Congress for 2.5 years there in Houston with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. So when it comes to that word politics, which really is, in essence, by definition, the activities that are associated with governance, right? I've seen a lot from both sides, and you've again articulated very, very, with great elocution. You told us a lot of those different layers. What I've kind of come to do, if you don't mind me, just kind of honing in for this short time, because I know we aren't going to be on long. I kind of wanted to speak to the millennials, if you all don't mind. I wanted to kind of just give this message to them that it's our church. Like, it's not their church, because here's what I found, and I'm just going to get right to it. I found that a lot of my friends, what we need Pastor Ryan Beckers and people who are willing to share their opinion, but do more than share their opinion. They're willing to actually do something about it. What we've done is, because we have a lot of different opportunities in social media to offer up our disdain, our frustration, irritations, and aggravations with the organization. And what we'll do is we'll talk in circles about everything that's wrong. But what we won't do is, a lot of us, especially those with whom I've had conversations, we will talk about what needs to happen, but then won't do anything to make it happen. How difficult is it for us to get some millennials to represent us as a delegate, in some of these constituency sessions and to engage in the work of actually seeing these changes take place? Again, it was mentioned earlier by Dr. Byrd as well as by Pastor Becker, the idea that we conceptualize, the realm of finances and the realm of the two different conferences. We can have discussion till we're blue in the face. When it comes to practical steps, one thing that I have a burden, this is just a heavy burden on me, y'all, is to talk to my people, because I'm a millennial, talk to my folk and say, stop leaving when it gets hard or when you get upset and frustrated. Wow. We've got to kind of shoulder the burden. And if I could just take a moment, like the Bible delineates from Genesis to Revelation, many illustrations that really scream to us that reform was often led by young people. If we even talk about Ellen White, how at 17 years old, she wasn't up there reciting a verse and then everybody's clapping for her like she's some child. No, there were young people who were at the center of this thing. Even thinking about the civil rights era, we have people. Martin Luther King was shot and killed in his 30s. Like, these are young people who are at the forefront. Oftentimes, we look back, and of course, we're thinking, and I'm talking again to my friends, I'm talking to y'all. I need my millennial folk to listen. We oftentimes think about those folk as if they were old people. They're old now, maybe, but during that time when they were leading the charge, they were young. And it is our responsibility. It falls on us to not merely see everything that's wrong. Because I know you were, I think, going to give me an opportunity to kind of share some things that I think could change, some things that should be different as it relates to our structure. And again, my grandfather was a president, my father's a pastor, and then my paternal grandmother's father was also a pastor. So I'm like 4 generations into this thing, right? So I can give you a bunch of my ideas and critiques on the structure. Dr. Byrd mentioned some of them, Pastor Becker did as well. I guess maybe what I'm more fired up about is that we are really pushing to get engaged with get this guy out of office. We don't need Trump in here no more. And when it comes to the politics of our country, standing up for racial and equality and all this stuff and going out there and protesting, thank God for the fire, the fervency, the heat that I'm seeing within my generation, going out there, and we are making our voices known right in the streets. We're protesting peacefully and all these different things. We've got to take that same energy to the church.
Wow.
And we can't just leave. The problem is I'm seeing, and I'm sorry, y'all jump in and just stop me when you need to stop me. But one of the problems I'm seeing is that we simply, and Pastor Byrd said, Dr. Byrd said it, I wrote it down. He said, and he was referring, I believe, to millennials when he said this. He said they're going to vote with their feet. And I that is a fact. I don't think he was wrong. I think he's stating fact. That is a problem. The problem is that we're voting with our feet by leaving as opposed to doing something about it. And what I'm fired up about, what I'm trying to encourage everybody, especially in this millennial crowd, because we're talking about millennials. Imagine the generation after, Generation Z and all these other, generations, man. If we're like leaving, you all already know the statistics and what they scream to us about the younger kids and what it's going to look like as it relates to a post-Christian America and all this stuff. We have to, and we're not talking about kids here. I have to say this because millennials are not children. We're talking about professionals, people who in their line of work have great responsibility, are bringing in great money, have great levels of accountability. And guess what? They're performing with excellence on their job.
Hey,
we're not talking. Yes, go ahead. Please jump in.
The oldest millennials are now 40. Just going to throw that out there.
40. In 2020, the oldest millennials are 40. That's the top, right?
Yep.
And 40, that ain't old, y'all. That ain't old. I don't know if I'm challenging someone's belief or perspective on this thing, but that is not old. We are young people, but while we are young, we're not children. We are professionals, y'all, and we have to take what we've gleaned as it relates to skills, as it relates to experiences, as it relates to the great ideas. I don't know of a generation who has better ideas. Again, I say this because you're articulating them every day on social media. You're critiquing everything every 2 seconds on your profile pages. Thank God for your vigilance and for your perspective. But what I'm really passionate about is this. Is not that we critique something and walk away from it and then call it their problem. It is not their problem. It is our problem. And we as millennials have to do things as it relates to politics, man. And I can go on and on about this. One of the things I learned in the Congresswoman's office is that, guess what, y'all? When the Congresswoman, Sheila Jackson Lee, who I worked for 2.5 years, when she would get back into her district from being there in D.C., during session, she's tired. She probably wants to get some rest. But you know what she did? Once she hit the ground, she had deboarded that plane. She would get in her car and we would drive her from event to event to event to event. You want to know why? Because she would show up at a 101-year-old lady's birthday party with 3 people. I put up 2, but I meant to say, 3 people who are there, not some big elaborate event. Of course, you can go to, she'll be there with the mayor, but then she'll go to these people who seemingly are unimportant. And you know what she'll do? She'll show up. And you want to know why she'll show up? Because guess what? Those people represent votes. And if there's something that I know politicians respond to, it is votes. And if people who are in charge are not threatened by you because all you do is leave and critique things from afar, then things will never change. Which is why I've learned that if you want to exercise your power, you better get engaged and start using that power in the form of voting, in the form of not talking about it from a distance, but getting engaged in the fight and making practical. I was scrolling, y'all. I got my phone here. I'm watching us live, right? I'm at the Pastors Roundtable. By the way, great Facebook. Like, you guys are doing great. Everything is just clean. It's professional. I love it. But as I'm scrolling through here, I saw some people put here in the comments. One person put pretty earlier on, they said, we're having great discussion, but what practically are we doing?
Yeah.
Like thanks for talking about it. But the question now becomes, what are we going to do about it? And you know what? That's my question. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm at this point where I'm tired of kind of hearing my friends complain about everything. I need to see more Pastor Beckers. I need to see more people who are our age, who are willing to not just articulate an opinion from a distance that's so far that, look, when it comes to church, it's like you're in the witness protection program. We can't find you during a meeting. We can't find you when it comes to operate, asking people for leadership. Oh my God, I'm about to tell on myself.
Hey,
Oh my,
JD, hold on, JD. Listen,
Oh.
listen. I am seeing back in our little green room here. I'm seeing Pastor Byrd nodding his head. I'm seeing Pastor Becker on here. I want to bring them back on because I know they want to kind of contribute to some of this thing and kind of they want to give you some visual
It's a real
affirmation.
problem.
So
It's
we're
a
going
real
to bring them
problem,
back
man.
on here. Here we
You're
go.
100%. Listen,
Boom.
as a leader in this church, I want you to know that I am fascinated by millennials and the choices they have made, the careers they're doing. I remember when I was young, you only became a pastor, a nurse, and a teacher. But now, man, we got young people who are civil engineers, who are
Yes.
chemists, and they bring something to the table that wasn't there before. And I'm afraid that leaders at my level are afraid to engage them, but they want them to wait until they're 35 or even now till they're 55, and then all of a sudden they can say something. We got to change that mindset. I want to say one other thing you said. You said that we need them involved. A lot of our young people are waiting for permission to do ministry. But I heard it said this way: you don't need permission to do ministry. God called all of us. And if we are doing ministry, it has nothing to do with the church structure. It has to do with ministry to God. And if we can do that, that will move this needle so much further down the road than for us to be waiting for somebody to say, hey, you can go ahead and do something. Trust me, there is too much ministry out there for us to be sitting around. Quarantine revival is one of the things that just shows that you didn't wait for the conference to tell you to do a revival. Man, we're on Q3, and I'm looking forward to Q3.
Yeah. Well, can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
Because I understand. While I'm pushing my millennial friends. I'm like, y'all, come on, let's get to it. Let's start seeing some action. At the same time, I do feel them that the resistance that is met oftentimes is so disheartening that it's like, why am I fighting a good fight, a fight about something good in church?
Yeah.
I already got enough issues, pressures at my job. So when I come here trying to do something productive, why do I have to fight? So I get that. I get that. But at the same time, I'm kind of torn because we've got to be stronger than that. We've got to rally together. If it's going to take strategy, just like you would strategize in the realm of civic justice, we need to do the same thing even in church. And I get it. You're frustrated. You're mad. But come on, guys, it's time for us to come together and do something about it. And I like what you just said. Don't wait. We're not waiting for permission. Reform never came because the people in power said, I want you all to tell me how I need to change. No, it's because some folk, it's called the dogged Dionysian determination. It's what Martin Luther King called the fierce urgency of now. See, I feel like preaching right here. It's when I've had enough and I'm not going to wait any longer. It's when I'm going to do something about it now. And I'm willing to go, I'm willing to go through hell and high water to get what God has for me type of thing. And I get the disenchantment, but I'm trying to rally together my folk, y'all, because listen, we have great ideas, great suggestions, great contributions, and we need to make them. And let's not just walk away and chuck the deuces. That's just too easy.
I want to be a millennial now. I want to go get my skinny jeans. And,
I mean, because again, there's a place where wisdom, and experience and years, that's absolutely vital. We need that. But also with that instruction and wisdom and guidance that we're receiving from those who've come before us, again, there are certain things that require certain attributes. Some things require the strength of young people who are going to go out there and almost with the naivety, to believe that we can't lose, Sometimes that's required because some of us, who've been in this thing for a while and experience has taught us certain things, we might be a little limited in our imagination and in that. Again, there's certain values that they're invaluable aspects of this reform that we want to see take place that young people bring to the table, which is why I want to just encourage us that we have something to give and we need to utilize what we got. And don't you dare allow the disenchantment of all the frustrations, irritations, and aggravations to push you to the sidelines of this thing or to just leave altogether. Because, we can just... The average age of Adventists, we can talk about that. We can talk about so many different things, but it's just disheartening because I'm seeing it, y'all. I'm not just seeing it in my own family. I'm not just seeing it in my friend circle. I'm seeing it in the statistics and everywhere else. We are leaving. We're willing to just do our Christian thing, and kind of disconnect from the Adventist movement. And I just feel like I feel like God is saying, look, I want you. I want to pass the baton to you, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. Nothing that's worth having comes easy. And I'm just trying to speak to that aspect of this fight that we're gonna have to put ourselves out there, and we're gonna have to fight with a tenacity and audacity that is required. And I don't know, that's kind of the burden that's on my heart, to call us to action. And we could talk practical steps, and I don't know if that's where y'all want to go next, but I at least wanted to start there, that it's time to call our people to arms, man, and don't just leave.
Right.
Listen,
and
practical steps.
If I can,
go ahead, Doc.
Paul, since you allowed me to come back, I'm dittoing everything Pastor Dog is saying. So true. You were right. We're in the back shaking our heads, nodding. And this is the perfect opportunity for action.
Yes.
In the sense that we are in the midst of a pandemic.
Come on.
When church reopens, when people start gathering back, we're going to have to all reinvent ourselves. Right. We're in a new normal. This is the perfect opportunity for us to look at what we've been doing, look at our structures, and make adjustments and modifications as necessary. Mm-hmm. One preacher said it best. He said, crisis is the vortex for opportunity.
Right.
So with that, we now have opportunity. And if we want to make some structural changes, blame it on COVID. Do it.
COVID made me do it.
And reinvent ourselves. I don't know how many churches are back in session now, but I would dare to say it's pretty safe that it won't be until the turn of the new year where everyone's really going to begin to reopen. We can very much use this time, August to December, and really have some hard discussions, implement some new things, and say, post the COVID area, this is the direction we're going. Mm-hmm. It's the perfect time. It's the perfect season. It's opportunity. Yes. And so I would just hope and pray that adults, baby boomers, and millennials, and everybody else in between, our leaders, our laity, everybody, that we use this as an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, not just with how we do worship, not just with technology, but how we move structurally. Mm-hmm. And I think now is the perfect time. It's the perfect time.
And I think one of those practical things that needs to take place is the decentralization of power. And it's kind of happening organically anyways, since we can't come and meet in some big fashion. It's now, when I talk about the focus of power, I'm talking now about a lot of things structurally that we can see change. And what I want us to do is be proactive. And Dr. Byrd, you mentioned it earlier. We got to be proactive, not reactive in this thing, because the truth is, with this, the numbers are there. If we want to be proactive, we need to structurally start talking about merging and partnerships they say that parachurch ministries and micro churches are going to be a result of this pandemic that we're experiencing now. And I think we should probably start being proactive and jump ahead of the curve and start making these decisions for ourselves. And again, this is not just to avoid financial issues in the future that was already articulated by Dr. Byrd earlier and other issues. This is the prime time opportunity, because it's going to happen. A lot of this is going to happen whether we like it or not. So we might as well be on top of it and make these decisions proactively as opposed to react. I'm done.
Listen, I am excited. Go ahead, Ryan. Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to say this, because I've been guilty of the train that a lot of people my age and in my age group hop on, which is just hating on all the people with power for not giving it up. Right. So I want to talk to the millennials and Gen Z, because Gen Z is very much here, already almost done with college. And I will say this. Absolutely, you do not need to wait for permission to do ministry, but it is your responsibility to understand the system in which you are trying to participate and do ministry.
Right.
You need to be educated and understand how to Policy and politics can be actually one of the greatest tools to accomplish your goals if you have the greatest understanding of how they should be used. Wow. There are things in the church manual, which is free to download online at any point. There are things in the church manual that any pastor, I'm sure any of you can actually attest to this, that have helped you remove a toxic leader from a position or from a sphere of influence, because you were able to effectively wield policy and church systems to your advantage to protect your church. It is our responsibility to learn and understand the system that we participate in, not so that we can perpetuate it, but so that we can work in ways that transform it, that grow it, that ultimately provide a place for people to be safe. And to the millennials that are leaving, I'm not going to say that I can, and Gen Z, I'm not saying I can convince you to stay and engage in something that you're just not passionate about.
Right.
All I will say is this: thank you for the courage for leaving, because it's through leaving that you're actually showing the church that it needs to change, and you're showing the areas that we need to do better in. So thank you for your courage, and know that I am praying and trusting that God's still got you.
Absolutely.
Because God is bigger than our denomination.
Yes,
and
he
any
is.
church membership that you hold. So know that you are not going alone, and thank you for the courage that you've shown. And if there's bitterness and resentment, I'm sorry for the way that you've been treated. And to those who are staying, prayers to you with courage and motivation, energy, and also wisdom, so that you can navigate these systems effectively and begin to make the changes that we're all longing to see.
That's good.
I think this opportunity that COVID has given us, we need to really seize it, because we will never have this opportunity again. This will never happen again, where the whole church has kind of come to a stop and now is reevaluating structure, reevaluating finance. How come we can now talk about it where those were taboo subjects? We were not able to sit down and talk to the treasurer about how he's spending the money, how he's invested in. We were never able to do that until now. And we have folks in place who can really sit up and now share that information. And now someone shared in the chat that we need to be transparent with what we do. And I think there's so much transparency out there. I think, again, we need to be willing to stop, listen, read, hear, pull up to the table, talk, do the things that we could not do because we were so busy in our lives. COVID has given us that opportunity to make that change. And I think the church is going to be great. The slogan is "Make America Great Again." I think the Seventh-day Adventist Church is going to be great again.
Let me throw this in there real quick, and just if somebody can chime on this. So, in our assessment of mission, we're talking about trying to engage people, and we're also trying to deal with the structure. So, do we have, and we may not have it, I want to hear, do we have a system problem or a people problem, or do we have a problem at all? So I guess.
I think we always have a people problem. And I also think we have a theology problem. And the clearest example I can give is actually through what has happened with the segregation of conferences and that kind of conversation, right? And I make this point in the video that we've referenced, where the demonization of specific rhythms and beats has also by default led to the demonization of an entire culture and cultural background of worship. And the demonization by a lot of white cultures or Eurocentric cultures towards Black cultures of worship that are very much rooted, that are still biblical and still all pleasing to God the same. But I think there's a lot of kind of cultural undoings from the Adventist perspective that we need to undo. And I think that starts with people being willing or learning to listen and being willing to engage in those conversations rather than starting from the place that I am right and you are wrong. I think a true debate is two people arriving or several people arriving at truth together. And that truth brings us both closer to God. And in that respect, there's no losers. There's only a win-win in the kingdom of God. And that's one of the things that I'm most thankful for. So I do think I think we have a cultural and a people problem, and people are taking advantage of systems that are naturally imperfect as a result of the imperfect people that made them. And so I think people can also take part in being the solution. And I think it speaks to the sovereignty of God that he somehow still accomplishes his mission through broken people like me.
That's good.
Powerful stuff.
Real good. I think Ryan is right on. I need a scheduled date for him to come to Oakwood. but I agree. People, because the system can change if the right people are in place to help change the system. So if we had to have a hierarchy of the challenges we face, Dr. Henry, what you asked, I think if we start with people and making some shifts, and not just with the person itself, but maybe some thinking, change the narrative, then that will help us.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna quickly say this. A lot of folks are looking to the leadership in the church to have the answers, but actually the answers in the pew. And when you talk to the leaders, they are saying, what can we do? They are looking for the answers. And so if we keep quiet, we allow the church to miss out on its greatest resource, what God is doing in our lives or through our lives.
All right. Listen, guys, our exit music is on. Our time is just about up. I just want you guys to know how excited I am to hear some of these other programs that are coming. JD, thank you so very much. We love what you're doing with Quarantine Revival, what we've heard today. We're looking forward to that Millennial conversation that you'll be a part of on the 3rd of October. You guys write that date down. Pastor Doggette is going to be with us along with 2 other Millennial pastors, or Millennials. I don't know if they'll all be pastors, but they'll be with us on the 3rd of October. That's when we start Pastors Roundtable, hit season 2. That's going to be the season opener. So you want to make sure that you are back for that. You're going to get some more of what we just heard. And then September 12th, just before that.
Pastor Paul, wait a minute.
Yes.
You said season 2. Season 2. You just said season 2. What do you mean?
Yeah, season 2. So
you didn't know we're syndicated now.
Next level.
So next week, or actually the 12th of September is the last. It's number 23 for us, and it's number 23. We had some Michael Jordan fans in this group, and some Dwayne. Who else? Who else is 23? Some Kobe fans, some LeBron fans, all of them 23. So they said, we're going to go to 23 and we're out. So at the 23rd episode is going to be the end of season 1 of the Pastors Roundtable. We're going to have a 2-week break, and then we're going to be back on October 3rd with the beginning of season 2. And Pastor Doggette is going to be with us for that season opener. But before we get to that end of the season, we're going to have Pastor Becker back with us on the 12th of September. And we're looking forward to that conversation. Write that down and be with us. And then Dr. Byrd has graciously consented to be with us on Halloween weekend, the 31st of October. So we're looking forward to having him back with us as well. Thank you all so very much for your contribution to the discussion today. We are excited about each of your ministries and what you're doing. Dr. Byrd with Oakwood University, with Breath of Life, with all of the projects that you got going on there. Ryan with your podcast and your YouTube channel. We've been blessed by it. We've already watched. I don't know if we told you, but we've watched a lot of your stuff. I saw we got to post some of those things in there to expose our audience to it. And then JD, just what you have been doing with the Quarantine Revival, what you're doing in your ministry. Awesome stuff. Keep it up, all of you. We appreciate your contribution. Stay at it. And for the rest of you that have joined us today, before you sign off, we want you to, if you're on Facebook, we want you to jump over to the YouTube channel, sign up with subscribing to that channel. Every now and then we're going to put content up on the YouTube channel that is not live streamed. So you want to go over there to the YouTube channel, click that subscribe button, hit the little bell so that you'll get noticed when extra stuff goes up, and we really appreciate that. Until then, we will see you next time when you join us back here at the Round Table, where we aim to keep ministry relevant,
resourced,
and real.
All right. We will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.